Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Red Room. And tonight is a follow-on from last week when we had a conversation about forgiveness. Tonight is rebuilding trust. And that means that all of us at some time or another in our lives have had varying degrees of hurts, injuries, wounding, betrayal. And we talked about forgiveness and how we do that to alter something in us and give something to the other. Whether or not the other person is able to forgive us when we apologize, that's up to them. And one of the things that people bring to me quite often, especially as a marriage counselor, is they have experienced loss of trust in some way or another. When one or the other, or sometimes both of them, have hurt the other person or done something that was against their commitment, some kind of a betrayal. And oftentimes it has to do with a feeling that one spouse or the other, and sometimes both, were untrue to the marriage with somebody else. And when they bring that to me, my first consideration is, number one, and this is kind of the way I phrase it. I look at one of them and I say, if we can change this circumstance and this difficulty, and we can resolve this, do you still want to be married to this person? And then I look at the other person. If we can change or resolve this difficulty, do you still want to be married to this person? And if I get yes on both sides, I say no sweat. That just means that we need to work through a problem and find some kind of reconnecting, letting go, forgiveness, and then rebuilding. And there are two things about rebuilding. And I'm just going to write myself a note here to make sure that I don't forget. Okay. There are certain beliefs that some of us have been taught where we get in that black and white place, or we hear this from other people. If you've been unfaithful to me, whether it's been a sexual affair or an emotional affair or just talking with your high school sweetheart on Facebook, it seems like we've been betrayed and that's it. There's no negotiation, there's no healing, there's no rebuilding, there's no forgiveness. I'm done, I'm gone. And we've been taught that if someone, especially if it's a sexual infidelity, then that completely ends the relationship. Now, others of us have been taught to tolerate that, where there are certain cultures, certain norms, where it's okay for one person to have a mistress or a guy on the side. And sometimes some relationships kind of allow that. They don't talk about it and they don't confront it. They just let it be. In my viewpoint of that is then that particular couple really isn't interested in true intimacy. We all make mistakes. I remind us, we're just human. And we have various things inside of us that are wounded or immature or uneducated, undeveloped, or blank spots. So lots of things come up in life where we make mistakes, we're clumsy, something doesn't work. And that is going to show up first of all and most sensitively in our intimate relationship, in our spousal or significant other relationship, which is one of the reasons I love being a relationship counselor. I know that that's a very meaningful place, and it's important that we either move it ahead, grow it, renew it, re-inspire it, resolve the hurts and the wounds. And many of you will remember that I have reminded us that the number one predictor of divorce or the split up of a relationship is avoidance of conflict. So if there's something that's not right, we need to immediately go to that place and say, this is a problem, let's figure out what to do. Well, I already have a comment. I love that. Let's see. Heather, I know I should want to rebuild, as you say, but I can't honestly say that I think it's a good idea in my case. How do I know when it's wise to move on? That's a difficult question, isn't it? And I remember at the end of my first marriage, and it wasn't a marriage about a great love. It was a marriage for a certain set of circumstances in my life and in my growth. And I, as most of us, want to be true to our commitments and our word. I asked myself for about 3 years, is this how I should live? When do I walk away? What is my responsibility? What do I learn to be patient and kind with? And what do I refuse to tolerate? And there, of course, and this is what intimate relationships bring up, is the deepest and most sensitive part of spiritual growth. Of, well, is this a place where I need to be because I'm growing myself and I need to learn to love this person and forgive this person? Or is this a relationship that's done, that's complete, and that I need to just tie a ribbon on it and say thank you and fare thee well? So for each one of us, each couple, that's going to be a different kind of a decision, because no one relationship is like any other. And sometimes we can't rebuild trust. And even if we did rebuild trust, what's left in the relationship isn't at a mature enough and deep enough level for us to really have a meaningful, intimate bond. Some people don't want that. Others of us refuse to accept anything less. And then various things in between. So you may be right, dear, in saying, honestly, I don't think it's a good idea in my case, and it may not be. And then my answer to that would be, can you rebuild? Sometimes a relationship really has plateaued out and it's there and it's not really alive anymore. It's gone. Can you rebuild to the next level? Have the two of you tried it? Or if you go to the next level, is that person willing to go with you? Or is there something more there? Or is there always going to be something deep that's important that is missing? Let's see here. Can I rebuild? I would say it's not up to me. And it may not be. So often, one person is willing to rebuild, grow, and change, and the other person is not. Or maybe you've already checked out a long time ago, and the other person doesn't know it. Or maybe the other person betrayed you but is not willing to make reparations and rebuild the trust. And in that case, if the other person isn't willing to rebuild the trust, the best friendship, the honesty, the kindness, the goodness, and the sincere care, then the intimacy is lost, if it ever was there. And for a mature person who wants real meaning with the beloved, then that's not enough. And think about it this way. Relationships have all degrees of depth, intensity, substance. For example, some relationship is as thin and kind of amorphous and indescribable as a gas, where there's not much to hang on to there. These people just kind of come and go easily. Other relationships are like two marble sculptures where they've actually been sculpted together, and they are so strong and so beautiful that there's so much substance. No matter what happens to them, nothing can get in between them. Nothing can disturb the love that they have. Nothing is too big for them to look at any injury, any problem, and to honestly come together and humbly heal it together. And so there are different substances, different levels of development, different, how do I say, different cultural styles, different meanings, different levels of intensity of connection. Each one of us is going to build a relationship in accord with our empowerment, our potential, and our desire. And sometimes, most often actually, a relationship has its own lifespan. Sometimes it's for 60 years. That's the span of that relationship, and it lasts until death. And one of the, parents of one of our dear friends, his dad died, and then 3 months later, his mother followed him. They were bonded for life. Now there are others, and you know these people, where they get married and it's done in 2 years, or maybe they never do get married. So it would be presumptuous for us to judge any relationship from the outside to try and tell people how to live it and what's appropriate. Each one of us knows the lifespan of our relationship. Let's see here. It is he that should do the rebuilding. Sometimes I can see him the way he was in the past, and I really miss that. So I'm in a sad state on indecision, of indecision. And then the question that I would have for you, dear, have you been to a mentor? Have you been to a minister, a relationship counselor, or a marriage counselor like me, where a third person comes in and kind of looks at it from the outside and asks questions of the two of you to see if you can clean up whatever the division or the injury is, how that was caused. And because it's hard to really know what was there, like you said, I really miss that. What if you could get it back? I don't know. And sometimes we get to kind of that impasse where if we don't go to a marriage counselor or to another level in some way, or we don't get some kind of a wake-up call where we stop and regroup and rethink what we're doing. I think of relationships as something that is an alive entity. A relationship is created by the intersection of two people over time, and it is alive. It shifts, grows, and changes depending on the two people and how they treat it or build it or alter it. And that relationship has a kind of a cycle. Oftentimes, not all the time, but often it's 7 years, where it's almost like it's in gestation, like a pregnancy, where it's kind of formed, and then it flowers, and you find your stride, and you do various things in life. And then whatever meaning you've created together, the two of you have grown to a different level yourselves in terms of how old you are, your competency in certain ways in the world and with each other. Children may affect it, grandchildren. And it gets, like I mentioned earlier, to a plateau. And if we're patient, and if there's still that longing there, still, like I said, yes, I will not tolerate it the way it is. And if we can remove these hurts or these misunderstandings or these parts that aren't developed, if we can remove that, I still love this person. Then I say, let's work on it. Let's see what happens. And once you start working on something consciously, logically, with specific exercises and discussions and insight, um, within months, you have a sense of whether in the deepest part of your heart and soul, something new has awakened humbly and genuinely for this person and this relationship. Or that you've done your best and it's just flat. What you really want, your style, maybe it's shifted and grown, or maybe you now require a relationship of deeper intimacy and deeper risk, and the other person is not going to go for that kind of risk or intimacy. Then it's time for something different. And to say, as I mentioned before, to the other person, thank you so much and fare thee well. I hope that you find something better, because I will just hold you back and our relationship back, because what I need isn't here. And it's satisfying, I think, for us to see a counselor or a professional for a while to make sure that you've healed all the wounds there, so that when you end this relationship, you're not just running away, you're not angry, that there's no loadedness in it. You behave like a gentleman and a lady, where you get honest and respectful about what's wrong and clearly understand that it's not going to build, because this person really wants that, this person really wants that, and it's not ever going to come together again. Then there's no running away, and there's no ire, anger, negativity. It's two adults that genuinely can say, thanks, we had a good run. Thanks for being in my life and for growing alongside me through certain things, or for being a good co-parent, and I wish the best for you. That's my ideal. That's what I want for us when we end a relationship, and then walk freely with nothing behind you that you regret. Walk freely forward into whatever the world has for you next. So I would recommend, if you haven't seen a counselor yet, or your minister or a mentor, a third party outside of you in some way, I would recommend that you not walk away until you do that. Because it's like, if you've been in a relationship for a while and have given it a part of your life, that's a big investment. And you want to kind of prove that where you've come to is true, and that you kind of put closure on it so that you can walk away and not run away. So does that make sense? Because if you have sadness, there needs to be something resolved there in some way. And maybe it's sad that you're grieving the loss of the relationship because it's already lost. And that says that you're sad because there was something there that was of value to you, and that now it's time to walk away because it really is complete and lost. And the person says, yes, that makes sense. Good. Thank you. So my general rule of thumb is, if you've spent some time and sincerity in a relationship, you don't want to just walk away from it. You want to do due diligence and give it everything you've got before you walk away after some kind of an investment like that. And thank you for chiming in. Anyone else who is viewing, I'm happy for your questions, your comments, and a conversation with you. So tonight, it's about rebuilding trust. And sometimes you can't rebuild trust. Sometimes you can't rebuild a relationship. And sometimes, if the two of you really do decide to rebuild and come back together again, it's, as they say, working on your relationship. And when that happens, once you get through rebuilding the trust and coming to another level of agreement and intimacy, sometimes that makes this relationship so powerful and so humble, so proven, so tested, that there is nothing ever in the world that can get in between the two of you again. So, and then sometimes you go to another level, and yet the end of that relationship comes down the road in another 7 years or another 20 years. I couldn't predict. Relationships are so deeply meaningful, important, and challenging. I think they require us to grow more than anything else. And so rebuilding trust, I think, is one of the great ordeals of a human being's life. Sometimes a betrayal of trust is from the outside looking in, it looks like a small thing. And I've had various couples come to me with the complaint where one of them, and this is of course a new thing in the last few years, one of them has had a conversation online or on Facebook or with an old friend, and begun to connect in honesty and friendship, and maybe even in an emotional affair, and the other person or the spouse finds this and is profoundly wounded, feels completely betrayed. So then how do we rebuild that trust? Or also they find out that the person had an affair, or a one-night stand, or has just been telling another woman or another man their old deep secrets, or their hurts or their frustrations that rightfully belong in the intimate relationship. So if that happens, one of the things that is pretty much a rule of thumb is there's something that's not there in the marriage or in the intimate relationship. Because most people really have that sense of faithfulness and principles where if they're invested in a relationship, they're faithful to that relationship. And no matter what happens, somebody comes along at a convention and wants to play around. It's like if you're really married to somebody and really in the heart and soul and body connected, you're saying, get off me, get away from me, go somewhere else. That's yucky. So if the intimate relationship is that deep and meaningful, it's almost impossible to be seduced by somebody else or to be unfaithful. But if there's something that's a problem in the relationship, and the person is feeling misunderstood or feeling hurt, like this person was saying, hurt and sad and hopeless about reconnecting, then that person is vulnerable to somebody from the outside, maybe at work, maybe online, wherever it is you encounter somebody who is also hurt or needy, and then start commiserating or being understanding in a way that the spouse is not. So my ideal is that when there's a bump in the road in your relationship, you come to a marriage counselor or a mentor and say, how do we talk about this conflict or this problem and resolve it and get past it, instead of getting to the point where there's an infidelity and a betrayal of trust. Even then, though, if you want to love each other, no sweat. We know how to do that. Rebuilding of trust means that the person who betrayed the spouse needs to be willing to prove to the other person that they can once again trust. Now, rebuilding trust, just because there's a promise and a willingness, the person who has been betrayed can't, if they're intelligent, they can't just automatically go back to the way we were, so to speak. that person needs to say, well, if you really mean it, if you really mean that you're not going to betray me again or hurt me again, then I need to know that it's not just your words. So then that means rebuilding trust. And in order to rebuild trust, we need time, just pure, plain old time. And over a month, over 6 months, over a year and a half, the more time goes on and the more there's honesty, openness, connectedness, and deep meaning, and a feeling of being adored, that the trust is stronger and stronger and stronger. And that means patience on both parts. There has to be honesty, and there has to be complete openness, which means if there are passwords or blockages in information, those have to go, so that the person who is betrayed can at any point look at the bank account, can look at the phone records, can look at the email, and whatever else it is that held the secrets. Sometimes it means changing a phone number. If whoever, there may be another person that keeps stalking or something. But to have complete honesty, complete openness and honesty, if you want to build trust, you've got to have that. Otherwise, the trust is not going to be there, because there's a withhold, there's a secret, there's some degree of power and control. There needs to be a recommitment to the marriage or the relationship, where when I'm mentoring a couple in this, it's then time to go to a higher level of paying attention, of doing the loving thing. I was talking to a couple recently where, yes, she has a honey-do list, and he says, I'll get to it when I'm ready. Well, if he's betrayed her and in essence shown her that she's number 2, at that point, that honey-do list needs to be his first priority. And not saying, well, I'll get to it when I get to it in my own good time. No, when she gives it to him, he says, I'm happy to do this for you. And this is what I'm going to do. And if this isn't good enough for you, then tell me what you need. I'm there for you completely. I'm committed to you. I'm committed to this marriage. And however you need me to have what Jack and I call a division of labor, I'm there. I'm not going to quibble. I'm not going to whine. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to say, don't try to push me around or be my mother. I'm there for you. And then, if that's true, he or she needs to rebuild that and be true to that commitment. And that's part of it, doing the loving thing. Of course, as we talked about last week, there needs to be forgiveness. Of course, there needs to be apology and being very clean and clear about what happened and what didn't happen. Sometimes, if it was an affair that lasted for a while, of course, the injured party in the marriage is going to want to know everything, and I don't recommend that. I don't want you to plant more hurtful images in your brain, in your awareness, that are necessary. So those kinds of details only cause what we call a secondary injury, secondary wounding. But there needs to be an apology and a forgiveness, and then this rebuilding of trust. Questions, comments, your own difficulties. Chime in, anyone who wants to. And thank you. It's so good to have company and to know that I have fans or people who are interested in learning. I really appreciate that. I love doing the Red Room, and it's wonderful to hear from you. So if you want to build trust, as again, forgiveness is necessary. Otherwise, you can't decide to start building trust. And trust is a decision. It's not some amorphous thing. It's you deciding to have a conversation and to say, yes, okay, you've given me these assurances, these behaviors, and we've set this up. I am going to decide to trust you now. Even though I'm going to get scared or concerned, you're going to give me the information on a day-to-day basis that will calm my fear, calm my sense of risk, and I'm going to decide to trust you. So it is a decision. It's not something that's kind of just amorphous out there. It's a decision, and it's a decision to rebuild it. And that's what adults do. When you care, you're saying, I'm going to do everything I can to earn your trust back. And it works. It takes time, and there'll always be a sensitivity around that particular thing. You know, if it was an online emotional affair, then your spouse, your beloved, is always going to be concerned about online stuff. And that says that there's another part to rebuilding trust. And that's the other thing that I wanted to share with you. It's time to take the relationship to another level. It's time to invest more. It's time to do more than you've done together before. And that means a whole renewal in the marriage or the relationship, that where you go into a world or into a land or into a hobby or an activity or open communication that you didn't have before. You've built now your relationship to another level of maturity and intimacy and vulnerability, where you don't hold back, you don't protect yourself, you're honest and open, even though it's scary. So that's another part of rebuilding trust, is you've got to take that relationship to another level of conveying to the other person, you are number one. I'm not putting anybody else before you. I'm not letting anybody get in between the two of us. You are my number one, and give me the option, give me the ability to day, with my behaviors, with my words, with my phone calls, with my honest communication, with my helping you out, with the fun things that I plan for us, to prove to you over and over again that you can trust me, and that this is where my heart is invested, and this alone. Any questions about that? Any difficulties with that from anyone? Glad to hear from you. So the two levels of rebuilding trust are, as I said, you've got to apologize and forgive. And I love Gary Chapman's new book on the 5 languages of apology. I should have it right here, yes. So the 5 languages of apology, that means that if you've broken trust and you want to rebuild trust, you want to know how your partner needs to hear your apology so that they can accept it and be more ready to forgive you. So there are, and I love this book, Gary Chapman's book on apology. It just came out last year. The 5 languages, expressing regret, which is saying, I am sorry. Some people have a real hard time saying, I'm sorry. It seems simple, and there are people that's what they have to have. All the rest doesn't count. They just want your words to apologize and to say, I am sorry. I feel sorry for this. Then second love language, a language of apology is accepting responsibility, which means saying it, admitting it, saying, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I did something that was hurtful. I was wrong. I accept responsibility for my behavior and what I did. And then number 3, making restitution. What can I do to make it right? You know, some people, you say, well, yeah, you said you're sorry, but you're not willing to heal the wound or make up for it or go the extra mile to show me that I'm number one and not that person. So be willing to say, what can I do to make it right? I'm willing to spend my time, energy, money, attention to, in some way or another, pay you back or heal the wound by going the extra mile. That's number 3. And number 4 is genuinely repenting, which says, I'll try not to do that again. In essence, making a new commitment. And, I'm thinking, I'll try not to do that again. What I really want to hear is, I won't do that again. And if there is a possibility that I could do that again, then let's talk about how we can genuinely prevent that from happening, because I'm willing to put up that roadblock or that wake-up call or that reminder to make sure that it doesn't happen again and that you don't suffer this again at my hands. So genuinely repenting. And then the last language of apology is requesting forgiveness. Will you forgive me? Isn't that interesting that that's the one that some people really need more than anything? They want you to ask for their forgiveness so they can give you their forgiveness. Aren't these lovely? So if you want to rebuild trust, and you've got some pretty hefty trust building to do, I would recommend Gary Chapman's book. It's wonderful. It's very utilitarian. Also, if someone has been injured, it's really important that there is that coming together again where the injured person talks about how bad it hurt, and the person who delivered the injury or who was responsible for it stands there or stays there with them and listens and withstands, is robust enough to take it. Yes, tell me, I need to know how it hurt you. It's only right that you tell me what the consequences of my actions were, and I am willing to listen. And then to affirm or validate the hurt of the other person. To say, I understand how deeply hurt you were. I understand how that affected you with such a sincere and almost unforgivable betrayal of your faithfulness, your honor, your love. So there needs to be that clean conversation where the person who delivered the injury stands there or stays there, because this is one of those things of real intimacy. It's a risk. It's hard to hear the other person cry and talk about their hurt and their anger and questions and wondering in a world of anxiety and fear, what happened and how could this happen? And so it's very important that the two people have that deep connection and communication, getting very clear on what happened and how hurtful it was, how big the betrayal was. So the anger and the hurt needs to be expressed, and the person who caused it needs to listen to it and want to understand it. It shows the investment in the relationship and a willingness to take the responsibility for what they did. Then it needs to be let go. The person who was injured needs at some point to finish the catharsis, the venting, and the confrontation, and to let it go. To say, okay, I know now that you understand and you get it, and now we need to move forward. And the person, both people need to understand that the relationship will never be quite what it was before. Now, that may mean a good thing too. It may mean that the two of you will never get to that place where you've, in essence, um, made your relationship vulnerable to something like that. Because if it was a strong one in the beginning, it probably wouldn't have been betrayed or vulnerable. So to know that you'll never go back the way it was before, which may have been immature, may have been undeveloped, may have been too stressed by certain circumstances in life, may have been abandoned because the two of you were being co-parents rather than spouses or lovers. So that both of you need to know that you'll never go back. And probably it's a good thing because you're going to build to another level of maturity and really understanding the reality of the world, that it's not perfect, we do make mistakes, and that when we apologize and receive forgiveness and make restitution, the bond is somehow humbler, more, in a certain way, delicate, risking, and then in another way, more reverent and more sensitive. So that, if you will, it can be that you go to another level of sensitivity and love and a more, how do I say, more honest and more complex interaction in how you treat each other, how you communicate with each other, how you structure your day. It may change the tenor of all of your phone calls for forever, or how you and when you make phone calls, how you write notes to each other, how you make sure that you communicate honestly and completely, how your bank accounts are now structured and run. Many, many things. So that you want to keep your eyes open in the future, because relationships do build and go through a cycle, and maybe it needs to be paid attention to if you find it sinking, or maybe it'll never be quite the same in terms of that innocence and naivete of believing that it was always perfect. So there you have some meaningful and real concepts around experiencing a betrayal and a rebuilding of trust. And I'm very interested. Is this helpful? Does this make sense? Does this apply to what you know, or what a betrayal you've experienced from yourself or in your family? Any questions about this? And thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm wondering if the person that talked about a sad state on indecision, if you've gotten some insights about what you can do or what you want to do next about rebuilding trust. So when your relationship has been damaged by a betrayal and rebuilding trust, you know it'll never be the same. And I want to remind you that it can be even stronger. Stronger because now you're quote unquote gun shy. You know that if you don't pay attention to it, you can, your marriage can become thin and threadbare or too vulnerable to outside pressures or internal sadnesses and needs. Okay, Heather, yes, this is a very good topic. Oh, thank you, dear. Thank you. It's wonderful to hear that you're listening, and it is a good topic for you. Good. I've got a quote here from Harry Stimson. He said, "The chief lesson I have learned in a long life is that the only way to make a man trustworthy is to trust him. And the surest way to make him untrustworthy is to distrust him and to show your distrust. Now that relates to some people naturally from their childhood or from having betrayals in the past, they are naturally suspicious. Naturally, or they've been habituated to distrust. And you know many people where a man has been so insulted and disrespected by women that he doesn't trust women, or a woman who has been so um, used and betrayed by men, she doesn't quite trust men. And so even though she falls in love with somebody, even though he finds his true love, there's still a sense of suspicion and questioning, and which doesn't come from this relationship. It comes from past relationships or even childhood. You know, if you grew up in a home where the father was a womanizer and the mom was just kind of a doormat and tolerated it and didn't talk about it, but you knew that the dad was sleeping around and did it regularly and didn't really care, didn't think that it was important that he stay faithful to his wife. He had a lot of fun with a lot of women. Well, if you grow up around a relationship like that, you're going to assume that all men are philanderers or womanizers, or be seared if, even if the person you fall in love with or marry or have an intimate relationship never did anything like that, but maybe is very warm and companionable, extrovert, and talks to people and enjoys people free and easily, then the suspicious person who has experienced, you know, maybe a womanizer who was having fun with all kinds of women will interpret that kind of happy friendliness as the seeds of a womanizer. Or a woman who perhaps was sexually abused and she's either shut down, or the other hand, she uses seductiveness to control men. Well, she doesn't trust them, and she will control and manipulate, which means she's not available for an intimate relationship and is suspicious. And if a man falls in love with a woman who has that kind of wounding, there's nothing he can do to prove to her that she can trust him until she heals her own wound. No matter what he does, all he has to do is answer the phone the wrong way, or just look out the bus window when there's a woman with a beautiful outfit on, and he's immediately accused of betraying her. Well, she has a wound. She's too suspicious. And, oftentimes there are good reasons for that, but not with this person. That is such a hard thing to handle. And some people bring that issue to me, whether he's too suspicious of her and jealous. He might even be violent, and she experiences domestic violence because she answered the doorbell when the postman came and she was too nice to him. And then he ends up being suspicious of her and accusing her of wanting to sleep with the postman. Well, it's like, give me a break. Well, he has somehow or another developed an inability to trust and is too suspicious. Those are horrible things to live with. And if you've got that in your relationship, please do not live with it. Please do not allow that to continue. You can never really build trust when there's someone who is that suspicious and who is that violating. And this other person says, this is a very good topic and applies to me a little as well. Thank you. Most of us have been betrayed. I mean, it's a human life. Nobody's perfect. We make mistakes. Some people are revengeful. Some people are angry. And they do things that are not kind. And then there are people who have been, as I was just describing, wounded. Sometimes it's just a cultural wound. Sometimes it's just a religious wound or philosophical wound of some sort where there's this pattern of suspiciousness or jealousy. And my heart goes out to those of you or those people who are plagued by that, where it's almost impossible unless you heal that false belief or that woundedness that causes suspicion and jealousy. It's almost impossible to build an intimate relationship because the trust isn't strong enough. And we really need a strong trust in order to make a complete and commitment and an openness to risking true intimacy. So we're coming down to the end of our hour. Any other questions, any other concerns or comments that you'd like me to speak to on this subject? Anything that you may be having trouble with, or one of your children or a friend? Because trust, when you look at my marriage model, the first 3 requirements for an intimate relationship, it has to do with commitment and trust. And if we can't go there, then we're not really going to be able to get true intimacy. Because in order to trust, which means lay ourselves open and vulnerable to being completely honest about everything that we are in our beliefs, our dreams, our feelings, the things that we deeply care about, the things that we're wounded with. We need to be able to trust that with our best friend and our lover. And if we can't open up, then we can't be best friends. And we can't really go to the romantic level of the beloved. And that's what I want for all of us who really want a great relationship. That's what most healthy human beings want, that and are capable of doing that. And sometimes, it helps when there's somebody like me who is so honest and knowledgeable that I can say this is a tough thing, and you can learn, you can get through it, you can rebuild trust. When we love somebody, really love somebody, there's almost nothing that we can't forgive and then rebuild trust. Sometimes it takes a while, but we naturally want to do that, and we can do that when the love comes back. So thank you all so much for tuning in tonight as we talk about this vulnerability, which requires that we risk, that we be courageous, that we put all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak, where we pull back everything we have to make this our best friend, open and honest about everything, to be willing to respond to our beloved in whatever way, to be romantic and loving. If what she responds to more than anything is you helping her around the house with the dishes, with the sweeping, with the making of beds, and that's what really in her heart makes her feel like you adore her, she is adored, be willing to do it. Be willing to say, you're my beloved, you're my darling. I want to know my woman, and I am there for you and with you. Same thing about women, of course. Another comment, dear. Thank you. You have made me think about a lot of things in the past, the way I handle things incorrectly. Oh, you're so welcome, and how honest of you, how strong and courageous of you to look at the things that you handled incorrectly and then to learn to be more than you used to be. Hopefully all of us do that. We're strong enough to look with a very clear eye at ourselves, and I want you also to remember that you need to forgive yourself. Because I could almost guarantee you that if you handled things incorrectly in the past, you just didn't know how to handle it in any better way. That's how most good folks are. We do our best, and we do it incorrectly because it's based on something or other that we thought was the right thing. Um, when we do that, when we admit our inability or our mistakes, our beloved oftentimes loves us even more. Just like those restitution um, words or admittances for true language of apology. It makes the other person feel very loved and feel your courage in terms of being able to come with such an open heart and open hands to a relationship. Incorrectnesses, remember, lessons, remember, are always the fruit of a deeper knowing, a deeper learning, a deeper love. So if you find one of those, you can use it. You can use it to go to a deeper level of risk, intimacy, and trust. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to the Red Room tonight. And also, if you're up against something, or you have a friend who is up against something, and you want to ask Heather about anything, email me, tune into me on my website. I've got little cards and such that I send to people about the Red Room. Every week it's free, and if you have a topic that you want me to approach or have a conversation with you about, and it's this lovely way of being anonymous, by all means let me know. Or if any of you tonight have a topic that is troubling you or that you're curious about or are unclear about, please, I'm always interested and always willing. I may know about it, I may not, and I'll tell you one way or the other. So thank you so much for being with me. You're so welcome, and good night to you, and I will see you next week, same time, same place, in the Red Room, talking about something that's meaningful in our lives with our loved ones, our co-workers, our friends, our relatives, and ourselves. So thank you, dear ones. Good night. You're welcome, dears. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place, at the Red Room.